Hey everyone, welcome to Heroic Elite Comics. And yes, you read that right, every superhero dies. Today we're diving into Days of Future Past, Doomsday, a powerful reimagining of the events leading up to the original Days of Future Past storyline from Uncanny X-Men 141 and 142, penned by Chris Claremont. That classic tale of hope and despair set the stage for one of the most compelling and bleak alternate futures ever told, where Sentinels seize control of North America, wiping out nearly all the superheroes. Those who survived were imprisoned in internment camps, awaiting their inevitable executions. But this version, the Doomsday Saga, expands on the events that shape that dystopian future, offering new twists, fresh perspectives, and an even darker narrative. The story begins at what we'll call Year Zero, an event that set everything in motion: the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly. Unlike the original storyline, where the villainous Mystique and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants orchestrated the assassination, this version of events only involves Kelly's death. No convoluted conspiracy, no trickery. Just a political assassination that would have massive ripple effects throughout history. In just 4 short years, the political landscape of the United States shifts dramatically, and William Stryker ascends to the presidency. Stryker's rise to power is nothing short of catastrophic for mutants. As a religious zealot and the leader of the Purifiers, a group bent on eradicating mutants, his presidency ushers in a dark era of persecution. But Stryker can't just rebrand the US military as the Purifiers and launch a full-scale war against mutants. That would be too obvious, too dangerous. Politics intervene. By Year 5, Congress passes the Mutant Control Act, legislation that severely limits the civil rights of mutants, effectively branding them second-class citizens. In response, Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, takes the fight all the way to the US Supreme Court. He argues that the act is unconstitutional, violating the basic rights of mutants as US citizens. The court agrees with him, and the law is struck down. While Daredevil's involvement wasn't revealed in the original Days of Future Past, it makes perfect sense now. After all, Stryker's presidency wasn't part of the initial lore, so it's no surprise that Daredevil would be the one to step up in this alternate reality. By Year 6, the US government embarks on a terrifying new project, the Sentinel program. These terrifying robotic enforcers were originally created by Bolivar Trask to hunt mutants, but after Trask's defeat, Stephen Lang takes over and enhances them with cutting-edge technology. By Year 11, the Sentinels are deployed, but not as attackers. No, they patrol the streets, acting as a visible deterrent to the mutant problem. Officially, they're there to protect humans, but in reality, they're cataloging mutants, studying their powers, and identifying potential threats. As the years go by, tensions escalate. By Year 18, we reach Stamford, Connecticut, a place rich with history in Marvel lore. In this reality, the Avengers resign in protest of the Mutant Control Act, standing in solidarity with mutants, but the government isn't deterred. They form a new superhero team called the Defenders, replacing the Avengers. And instead of Steve Rogers as Captain America, we get John Walker, US agent, a far more aggressive and controversial figure. Meanwhile, Iron Man is replaced by Obadiah Stane as Ironmonger, marking a shift from the iconic heroes we know and love. The X-Men, meanwhile, are still trying to fight off what they believe is a dangerous, villainous group in Stamford, but something isn't right. Wolverine starts to sense a dark undercurrent, especially when Nitro, under the influence of mutant growth hormone, explodes, decimating the town. In the aftermath, President Stryker declares martial law and the war against mutants intensifies. The story hints at a deeper conspiracy involving powerful figures like Valerie Cooper, Henry Peter Gyrick, Wilson Fisk, and Simon Trask. They seem to be orchestrating events from behind the scenes, pulling the strings that drive the destruction of mutants. Meanwhile, the Sentinels' prime directive to protect humanity may eventually evolve to include taking control of all humans, especially if they see mutants as a threat. This sparks a fiery debate, particularly between Simon Trask and Steve Rogers. Rogers points out that despite their heroic deeds, mutants are still treated like criminals, Trask counters, claiming the situation is far more complicated than Rogers realizes. What sets mutants apart from other superheroes is the origin of their powers. Unlike the Avengers, whose powers come from external sources, like Steve Rogers' super soldier serum, the Hulk's gamma radiation, or Thor's godly nature, mutants' powers emerge unpredictably during puberty, often before they can fully comprehend the consequences of their newfound abilities. Should we really allow a 13-year-old mutant who doesn't yet understand the full scope of their powers To roam free? What happens if they accidentally destroy an entire school with an explosion, shoot lasers from their eyes, or invade someone's mind without meaning to? Can we simply ignore the dangers posed by such individuals? Is it unreasonable to regulate them for everyone's safety? Some argue that it's not prejudice, it's just common sense. At the heart of this debate is the question, should mutants be allowed to live freely, or should they be controlled like dangerous weapons? Firearms, for example. The moral quandary deepens as it forces us to reconsider the very nature of what makes someone human and what makes them a weapon. As the story unfolds, the lines between heroes and mutants blur. Initially, the hostility was aimed squarely at mutants, but as tensions rise, it begins to encompass all heroes. The public's attitude shifts, and protests erupt between humans and mutants. When Spider-Man tries to intervene, he's tragically killed by the mob. Some argue Peter could have fought back, but he didn't want to hurt anyone. Personally, if I were Spider-Man, I'd be fighting my way out of there and hoping I didn't accidentally kill anyone in the process. The point is, the world is becoming a far darker and more dangerous place for those with powers. Meanwhile, Professor Charles Xavier's position becomes increasingly complicated. Magneto, always the more radical figure, seizes the opportunity to secure nuclear weapons, and his reasoning is chillingly rational. While the X-Men pursue Magneto, SHIELD lends them a hand in tracking down the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Magneto argues that Xavier's passive approach is no longer viable. He believes that the world is now actively targeting mutants and that negotiations are futile. His actions are driven by self-preservation, not a desire for global domination. Magneto's view is simple. He's not out to rule the world. He just wants protection from a system that is actively trying to destroy mutants. He warns Xavier that history is doomed to repeat itself. And as much as Xavier wants to hold on to his idealism, the mounting evidence suggests that Magneto may be right. The forces arrayed against them are too powerful to ignore. Magneto's prophecy begins to unfold with devastating consequences. Nuclear weapons are relocated to safety, but an accident involving Jean Grey's powers triggers a countdown that ends in a catastrophic explosion. Cyclops survives, but loses his eyesight in the blast. Later, at Jean's funeral, Magneto unexpectedly arrives, and though conflict nearly erupts, Cyclops chooses to listen to Magneto, leading to a ceasefire and a fragile truce between the two. But as history has shown, peace between Magneto and Xavier is never meant to last. Stryker, however, is determined to push forward with his agenda. He reinstates the Mutant Control Act, and this time the Supreme Court doesn't intervene. The government begins relocating mutants to internment camps, euphemistically called protection centers. Some mutants flee, but most stay, hoping that things will improve. Unfortunately, things only get worse. Magneto's warning proves chillingly accurate. Years later, when the government attempts to force the X-Men into submission, Xavier calls their bluff. When military forces attack, General Ross refuses to engage, citing his honor, but is quickly replaced, and the attack commences. The X-Men are lured away, and Stryker's forces strike, killing many of them, including Iceman, Nightcrawler, and ultimately Xavier. Only a few core members remain, and after a period of chaos and violence, KATE PRYDE and COLOSSUS marry. The last beacon of hope before the war escalates into full-blown destruction. By year 20, the X-Men are in constant hiding, moving between secret locations, as the Sentinels evolve into Nimrods, machines capable of attacking on multiple fronts, physically, mentally, and emotionally. The Sentinels' attacks grow more devastating, and Rachel Summers, the daughter of Jean Grey and Cyclops, survives the initial assault on the X-Men mansion. However, she is captured by the US government and turned into a hound, a mutant forced to hunt other mutants. As a telepath, Rachel's mind is twisted, and she is forced to target mutants, including Storm. Both Franklin and Storm are captured and sent to internment camps. Among the last remaining X-Men, Beast, Wolverine, and Gambit begin to rally the remaining mutants, strategizing their final stand against the Sentinels, hoping to reclaim some semblance of freedom before it's too late. But as the world outside descends into chaos, the heroes are left with an impossible choice. Continue fighting a losing battle, or seek a way to rewrite history and alter the tragic path that led to this inevitable future.